Hello, my name is Micaiah. Welcome to game design number 7. I work on a game for Hamlet. It's available on Steam. You can leave a comment if you'd like to. So we're talking about roguelikes for design number 7. We're going to be talking about Rogue, and then Roguelike, and then maybe some conclusion and talk about what's happening next, and of course talk a little bit more about Rogue Hamlet, the true lore. So anyways, it's Roguelike is the title of this sort of game design. This is actually going to be one of the more interesting game designs. Well, I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. This might be game design 7A because we're going to be talking about 3 different discussions here. I've sort of split these off into 3 different categories. These are not necessarily the best ideas. But anyways, part 1 is going to be talking about Rogue and roguelikes. Excuse me. Every video got a cough at least once. Anyways, and then part 2 we'll talk about multiplayer rogues and sort of the progression through there. This will also probably include MUDs as part of the major discussion of that, and then go from roguelikes to MUDs to EverQuest, and then part 3 we'll wrap this up with the discussion of 2D versus 3D, and then hopefully get some ideas. I have some interesting takes on ideas I want to look at in terms of roguelike. So, what is a roguelike? Well, roguelike is Rogue. Well, Rogue is a 1980 game. It sort of, I think, epitomizes sort of where this Rogue came from. And so Rogue, also known as Rogue, Exploring the Dungeons of Doom, is a dungeon crawling video game by Michael Choi and Glenn Wickman. It was later I'm probably going to butcher these names, which later contributions by Ken Arnold. Rogue is originally developed around 1980 for the Unix-based mainframe system as a freely distributed executable. Man, have we come a long way since then. This is not Rogue. This is actually a credit to Moria, but I sort of think like this is the sort of iteration of this idea where you have these this room right here, and it's sort of with these pathways that follow through. And this is probably not what it's difficult to say what it exactly looked like. There's a lot of the screenshots are not dated. This probably is not what it looked like. So we have actually a much better screenshot next. But you can sort of see that there's the @ symbol is like a staircase, or I don't remember what they are. There's a K. They actually might be the player, and then the K is like a cobalt, and then there's gold on the ground. The plus sign is a door, and then this is a pathway. So let's see if we can improve this a little bit better. So here we go. This is the accredited 1980 diagram for Rogue. You can sort of see a couple things I do want to point out. Well, first of all, I've a huge caveat to this. This is sort of my take on this whole idea. Someone was recently asking me what roguelike was, and I was like, well, it's a roguelike, and well, what's that? Well, that's kind of what this paper is hoping to talk about. But so this is just my take on these ideas, but you can sort of see the graphics look a little bit better. I don't think it's anything to do with the fact that this is horrible. You can still see the dots, and it's sort of the resolution and whatever. This is sort of these kind of bars or ASCII graphics, and they're just sort of a font system that was put together on these old. So they're sort of the ASCII characters, which is where pretty much everything comes from, the letters, the symbols. So yeah, so Rogue from 1980 sort of has this idea. I didn't actually talk about some of the precursor, but we'll get into some of that. But anyways, you can see that there's rooms, there's pathways through the rooms. This is really typical of roguelikes. I think is maybe a good where people focus on the most. It's obviously an overhead like 2D. I'm not sure if it's overhead. I guess overhead is a good word because you can sort of think about these walls as maybe there's a you can think about this as a 3D space of a wall, but But anyways, and then you can sort of see the character is actually now a person. We actually, this is kind of how we started. This is where I started actually in developing Visual Basic with this ASCII character set, and yes, this is kind of how I developed my. I created a Zelda. Me and my brother, and we actually had someone come in and help us with the save system, and that's how we started on Tandy 1000 back in right around 1980. It was actually 1990, 1985, 19, Unix systems were really expensive, and they were kind of colleges. So people, but then as the teletypes came out, it became a lot easier to sort of connect and play these games. They're sort of home-based systems that can connect to the server. Anyway, so let's see, what's the next shot? I think. Oh yeah, so I think we're gonna branch from here. One of the things we'd like to talk about is sort of, you can see now that this person's level 4. They have 29 HP, 16 strength. They have a certain amount of gold, armor, and experience. So as you go through the dungeon, you can pick up equipment, which increases your stats, and you level up. And it's sort of a level-based system, very much heavily so. There was probably a lot more stats. This is actually Moria, which actually came out in 1982. Is sort of the one that I played the most. Right around. I wouldn't say 82, but right somewhere around. We picked up I don't remember. I should kind of write down all the history of computers for, and get all this stuff down. As a sort of, I graduated from high school in 1995, so we're sort of. I don't think I was, but I was playing MUDs in the 90s, and we were probably doing so maybe 85. We were playing some of these games through an Amiga that my brother picked up. Anyway, so you can sort of see here that this character name is Wishhead. He's an elf. He's a male. He's a mage, which is always the most difficult class. Since he's an elf, he can live up to 108. His age is 108 years, I'm assuming. And then you can look at his stats are pretty OP, really. I'm not saying they cheated, but you basically would re-roll your stats 50,000 times, but 18/100 should give you a hint as sort of maybe some of the history of this, which is sort of it's basically a 19 strength, I believe, is what that's sort of trying to represent. And then you can see their dexter. Yeah, this is pretty much I don't know. It kind of feels like a cheaty character because you would never. Yeah, you can see this experience is sort of. You can see the experience is kind of level 34 is pretty insane for these games, because of it's based on the Dungeons and Dragons system basically. So maybe at level 34 they could have the stats that high. Maybe it's also based on their gear as well, so they could have +5 to strength or something like that. Maybe started out at 15 strength. Anyway, so that's and then anyways you can sort of see a lot of this. They've got a hit bonus, damage bonus. AC is sort of your armor. I don't, and then you've got oh yeah, so your AC is 49, which is your armor class. And then and then over here you got your hit points and mana as a magic user, and then you've got these sort of abilities such as stealth, disarming, searching, and infravision and perception. So as we progress further, I think this is more of a sort of overview. One of the big things about roguelikes, I think, is this idea that you start on a town level. We've got a hobbit. He's a rogue. This is kind of more what I was kind of used to. The graphics are kind of, this sort of, you still sort of see the same ASCII characters. But you can see sort of there's a bunch of book of magic spells, rations of food. That's a sort of another. It's hard to showcase in here, but huge aspects of these were sort of light sources, food, and you can sort of go to the town. There's always things wandering around, little NPCs. There wasn't anything to do with the town. These are just sort of buildings that are sort of like blacksmith. General store. I don't remember exactly all the numbers, but there's a blacksmith, a general store, bookshop. You actually sometimes had a house where you could drop off goods in some of these games, and then there's just basically a whole bunch of shops. You could sort of one of the things I thought was always cool is in the blacksmith. Some of these higher later level games, you could actually order special equipment and stuff. So, anyways, you can see over here is sort of a more normal sort of you roll your stats over and over and over again, so you can roll forever and try to get the best stats. But these are kind of more normal stats where you can see they went for intelligence for kind of dexterity. Dexterity is kind of what you would want to go for the rogue, or for the rogue class. I'm not. Anyways, and then here we go. We go from. So, anyways, we're started in 1980 with Rogue. Moria came out in 1982, and then Ainban in 1990. And we sort of have this tree of rogue likes or rogues. So we start with the original Rogue in 1980, and then it branches off into Moria, Lamb, Adon, Omega. We've got Hack, and then NetHack is also kind of pretty famous, I think, in terms of this branch over here, and then Slash them. But anyways, you can sort of see the path we're taking down here is that we had Rogue, and then Moria, and then this game called Ainban. Yeah, and then that comes out to 1990 for Ainban, and then just before I graduated from high school is Zingban. So we have a bunch of. Sorry, I'm playing Dragon Cliff in the background, but yeah, so we're up here with the Rogue, sort of this original picture we took from. You can sort of the Dungeons of Doom. I'm not sure if this is kind of a relationship to Doom. Let's see if we can Doom. Yeah, 1934. Well, yeah, here we go. This is sort of the idea. This came out in 1993. So yeah, so obviously it's not. I thought that was the case. Why would they? Could be a. Could just be a. Everybody likes the word Doom. I think there's the X-Men, or not the X-Men, but the Fantastic Four has a character. Let's see if I can sort of. Yeah. Mother of the character Doom. Wow, I didn't know that. Anyway, so then Doctor Doom is a Marvel character. So he sort of, and then 88 we had Judge Doom. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, so then Thulsa Doom is also a character from the Conan book. So I'm not sure the etymology. And then Mount Doom. Yeah, so this is sort of. I think J.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. If you look at, let's see how we can. I talked about Dungeons and Dragons, but let's see. Yeah, so he was born. Oh wow, he actually died in 1973. He was born in 1892, and I'm trying to think of when he sort of wrote. Yeah. So, wow. Oh yeah, so the epic, the Beowulf is a old English epic, and so he probably had access to sort of that. You have to think about these people didn't sort of have this same sort of yeah. So 1936, yeah, 1937 was wow. That's pretty amazing that this book from 1937 is quite popular nowadays. I mean, I've my brother read, the same brother I started programming with read the book, um, and I tried to read it several times, and it wasn't until the late 90s or something. I think right around the first movie came out, and then I went back and read the book, and I was really glad I did. It was it was tough to get started, but once you get started, it was hard to put down. I hadn't actually read the Silmarillion, which is yeah, before that. So yeah, so then I think that's sort of Mount Doom maybe might be more of a way to sort of, in my opinion, it's hard to say. Maybe there's in the history of all this stuff there is a better explanation of what. But you can Mines of Moria is definitely. Um, I think right here is sort of talking about is a roguelike inspired by the Lord of the Rings. So it's sort of this idea of the Moria is a sort of a yeah, pretty awesome. And then you actually are supposed to kill the Belrog, which is actually from um, yeah. Yeah, so then you can see Umoria inspired the Ingban. So I don't remember. I think Ingban is sort of this is what we're talking about. I think it's actually right over here. Was sort of the sort of the maybe a I do remember sort of playing it in color. I don't remember. Um, let's see. It doesn't say. We'll have to see. I'll have to wonder which one. There's actually a. So you kind of think about this roguelike. Let's see, role-playing games with procedural generation follow the formula of games namesake Rogue. Due to the large number of roguelikes are normally classified as either being a classical roguelike with qualities that meet the Berlin interpolation, is a subgenre of role-playing games characterized by dungeon crawl through procedural levels, turn-based gameplay, tile-based graphics, and permanent death of the player character. Most roguelikes are based on a high fantasy narrative reflecting influence. Then there's also roguelike, I think. So roguelikes are procedural death labyrinths, or some, but not all of these qualities. Um, yeah. So here's the AMI, the Commodore Amiga. Let's see if we can find a um, oh boy, AMI. Ancient domains and mystery. Anyway, so it's hard to say exactly which one I probably played. And eventually we didn't actually pull out of games on the Tandy, so it was probably much later. Anyways, you can sort of see that Do of Rogue in 1980 was actually not the first one, which is kind of I thought was rather interesting. We have Dungeon 1979. We've got Beneath Apple Manor in 1978. I've got the D&D. Uh, wow. Gary Wishen and Ray Wood created the D&D, and then you've got this something called the Plato. Yeah, the Plato from 1975. So this sort of seems like you can sort of look at the graphics on this is actually quite a bit different. It's amazing to think that these graphics, how much better they are. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a true to life of the actual experience of the game. Yeah, so then the Plato Systems, 1960. Uh, yeah. So, anyways, so it's amazing how much computers. Yeah. Yeah. So, anyway, but then we can sort of see here that let's see from this. No, let's see. Oh, nice. That's a cool picture. Yeah. It's a dungeon map for looks like yeah. So we haven't even got into some of the ideas. So yeah. So here's Dungeons Dragons. So dungeon crawls in the role playing games Dungeons Dragons were influenced by the Tolkien's The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And then let's see. Diner, books. So there's books also, and then Gary Gygax. Yeah. So anyways, so Dungeons Dragons, I think is sort of it's hard to say, sort of codified. I think a lot of the things here, but that was in 1974. So Dungeons and Dragons is a role playing game book. My famous one is something called Warhammer RPG or Fantasy RPG, I think, or something to that effect. Not the 40K is the um, yes, Yes, I think that's sort of the might be sort of there's a um, anyway, so it's sort of where I sort of came from more. Um, Let me see if we can do a Warhammer Fantasy RPG. Yeah, which just sort of went into yeah. So this one right here, this book is excuse me. I should caveat there's no. Anyways, yeah. So it's the Warhammer Fantasy Role Playing first edition is where we sort of what we're talking about here. Let me just snag this. Yeah. So this sort of this was in 1986. I like this one better than the I like this better than Dungeons and Dragons. We were not allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons, so we played this one instead. I like the character progression here a little bit better. Anyway, so that's a quite long video, but we kind of sort of see that we sort of, this is sort of the etymology of, which is, we've been using that word a little bit recently, which we talked about this in that as well, is this is the etymology of the rogue, which is, of course, sort of credited from the 1980 version. And then it's right around in here, it sort of picked it up. I think I've never probably played the original. Maybe I have played various versions. I've gotten really far away from this. There's actually a Tiles of Mars. There's actually a game called Tales of Mars. Yeah, which is sort of this game right here. It's on my wish list, and I never have picked it up. But it seems like a pretty cool. You can see how the graphics has changed quite a bit. That and then yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, my some it's just Steam's not working with them. So you can sort of see the. There we go. Um, yeah, and then the graphics have improved quite a bit, but this sort of the core gameplay. Um, I just think it's to me it's just not it. It's like it used to be fun, but maybe there's a lot more involved in these games. But there's sort of this sort of you can still sort of see the dungeons and characters, and it's getting away from this idea. And maybe I'll sort of we're looking at sort of how to bring that back without. Let's see, we can watch a. Yeah, so it's sort of kind of cool where there's like a lot more high level stuff to think about and a lot more world. It's sort of this idea where they took this concept of the town and sort of expanded upon. Wow, they're actually in space. So who knows? So that but so and I think in this so this kind of roguelike is sort of that procedural. This is one of the big things about the procedural dungeons. Procedural is actually really cool in these examples because you're exploring a dungeon that is sort of, and that's one of the concepts that we're focusing on as well. We're getting away from that a little bit because it's like, the procedural is sort of, it's hard to make a procedural fun. But anyways, we're getting sort of sidetracked. We're just kind of trying to talk about some of this, just an overall, so we can get the scope of the roguelike. So where do we go from here? Well, one of the things I think we talked about next is this thing is MUDs. Here, let me. So well, oops. Let me. So what? Oh, I guess it's. Let me. Right up here, we're on the next subject. Yeah, so we're talking about. So we talked about the rogue, talked about the roguelikes. This sort of roguelike is sort of a massive topic. And then we're going to talk about, so what's next? So part of that next is in part 2, we're going to be talking about multiplayer rogues, which I think is a sub-extension. I was talking about this idea, this sub-extension of this concept of rogues sort of went into this multiplayer, which is only natural that people would want to do that. That even in cool dungeons like this, with these sort of stat systems, which it sort of seems like it's unfortunate that they weren't multiplayer versions of this. They were sort of a multiplayer version of a mud. Which, well, what's a mud? A mud is a multi-user dimension, multi-user dimension, or no, no, oops, well, mud is mud. Excuse me. Should have, yeah. So a multi-user dimension, multi-user dungeon. I don't think there's. Let's see if we can get a screenshot. Yeah. So this is sort of what a mud looks like. It's sort of, and it's interesting too. I think if you look at the history of this, it sort of was like this secondary thing that was being developed. Yeah, yeah. 1976 was an adventure, so it was sort of taken from D&D. So you can sort of see where D&D influenced this. Um, and then that sort of talks about this. Yeah, so that's also another dungeon crawl through that. And then yeah, so that's sort of this is the only screenshot I've found so far, I think, of this. But anyway, so that sort of exploded into this Daiku mud, and this sort of, you can see, like, this is sort of it's just like these web addresses that you would connect through with the machine. Um, and hopefully we'll find some better pictures over the years. Maybe we'll Google some pictures. And anyways, and that led into EverQuest, and so it's sort of where we're going to be talking about next and where we're going with this. And then we can talk about the, let's see, where is that? There's a, yeah. Anyway, so then here's our sort of a original EverQuest. Yeah, so hopefully we'll get into some of that. So that's going to be next time. And then we're going to be following that up with part 3, talking about this 2D versus 3D. So whether or not that will be game design number 10, I'm not sure. I might just call it 7A, 7B, and 7C, and then we'll have to see how that goes. So anyway, so my name is Micaiah. I'm developing the game for Hamlet. I haven't talked a little bit. I've talked a little bit about it, but it's part of that is sort of that procedural dungeons we've been working on. We've been working on the character development, the stats. We're sort of I think we talked about the characters side of things in a game design recently. And then now we're actually about to bring all that online in our next by next Monday. Hopefully, we'll have a all that system sort of in place to what we're thinking about, and then we're gonna have to start iterating on the character development, and which will be one tier, and then we'll start iterating on the dungeon development, which is another tier, and then the final tier we'll be working on the town development, sort of the overworld. We won't be going to space, so if you want to go to space, you know, these games are improving. I think pretty awesome. You know, there's pretty, they're pretty cool. There's all sorts of variants. You can also play Dwarf Fortress is also, it's kind of an influence of that. There's desktop dungeons, I think, is, there's many new variations of these games. This one's was really fun. And then also you can try this other one, it linked here, which is a good example. Rogue's Tale is actually quite fun. I think Rogue Tale is kind of my semi-favorite one, where it's like you have, it's kind of cool. It's very, it feels much more roguelike than actually some of these. And then you get these Tetris inventory. And you get a lot of cool things to do. Some of the, yeah, I love how the screenshots are. Oh, pull up a screenshot. Isn't that smaller than the, anyway, so there's some really good examples of things to check out. But yeah, so my name has been Micaiah, and this is, well, or you can call me actually Micaiah Stevens, and this is for developing the Hamlet for Haven Studios, and we thought this would be a great topic to talk about sort of the, I'm just a big fan of talking about the history of some of these things. How did we get to where we're at? Sort of how to, stay in tune with some of that, and then sort of expand into do sort of my own thing, and that's where we're going. So thanks very much. I'll see everybody in the next Monday. I think is our next development log, which we'll talk about probably characters. I think is one of the bigger topics we're talking about, and then we'll see how much gets done in the interim. So thanks very much. You take care. Have a good one.